Hi, welcome back to my channel, where we wander through Hogwarts, Middle-earth, and sometimes Planet Earth. I'm Alejandra, and today I want to focus on the latter. I want to air some grievances, but mostly I want to talk about something very important: vaccine equality. As you can see, I'm obviously a pro-vaxxer, which feels like such a silly thing to have to say after all of this time through a pandemic, yet here we are. I'm not here to convince people to get vaccinated. By now, people should know that it's clearly the right thing to do. I've also spent a lot of time and energy in my personal life trying to convince people to get vaccinated, and honestly, I'm exhausted. It's exhausting work. And it feels like talking to a brick wall sometimes. I've broken down about it, and that's not what this video is about because I have to take breaks from that. No, I'm here to talk to people who have already been fully vaccinated, like me, a Moderna babe. Let's start with some context. I live in California, and even though I am already fully vaccinated, I'm also fully aware that the pandemic isn't over yet. I recently watched a virtual briefing about COVID-19 from the White House, which I will link in the description box below. Scientists are saying that this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. And while we can joke all we want about how the unvaccinated sounds like zombies, bro, it sounds like zombies. It's not surprising to me that it's the unvaccinated population that is still going through the pandemic, and honestly, it's causing the rest of us to continue to go through this pandemic. The unvaccinated population are the people circulating the Delta variant, which is more transmissible. And they are putting all of us at risk by continuing to allow the virus to mutate. This means our current vaccines could one day become ineffective, and we would either need booster shots or a new vaccine developed. And we all want to do this again, right? To be very clear, I'm annoyed at people who have vaccine access, like here in the United States, and refuse to be vaccinated. I'm not annoyed with people who don't have vaccine access and have no other choice. Obviously, they're not trying to spread this Delta variant. They're a victim of their circumstances. So we're all in a waiting game in which we're anxiously waiting to see if we can vaccinate enough people quickly enough worldwide in order to end the pandemic with our current vaccines. It's a lot to process. And I don't say that lightly. I've been journaling about it. Sometimes this doesn't feel real. Sometimes it feels too real. And I hope that you are hanging in there and taking care of yourself. And honestly, I hadn't thought about putting this in the video yet, but please make sure that you're in a good mental health space before continuing to watch this video, because it is heavy, but I also think that we can't shy away from heavy topics. This is how we learn how to make a difference in the world. And, you know, something that I have been thinking about is how it's probably never going to stop hurting, seeing all of the pain and suffering in the world. And it's okay for us to feel that pain, because that's how we feel empathy. That's how we move to change. And I mean, obviously take breaks and take care of yourself, but I also think it's important to know what's going on in the world so that we can do something to help. I know I'm smiling, but I want to get really angry at people who are just pretending that everything's back to normal. It's not. We're literally still in a pandemic. And honestly, the gaslighting that's happening in society just has me feeling like I'm screaming into the abyss. Is this the abyss? Is the internet the abyss? Speaking of normal, I actually don't want everything to go back to normal, because normal was not good. And while that's a whole other video, I feel my French coming out. And while that's a whole other video, what I mean by that and not wanting to go back to normal is that we shouldn't be trying to go back to the state of the country or the state of the world before COVID-19. We should be trying to progress forward. And that's really what this video is about, is progressing forward by changing the world for the better by advocating for a people's vaccine. Consider this a call to action, and I will have action items in this video, which I will link below in the description box, and we'll get to all of that later. Okay, let's get angry. Anger is a tool for change, you know? I watched Boys State last night, and one of the things that I loved in there was Renee saying that his grandma gave him advice about how to walk through the world. And I'm paraphrasing, but he was saying that his grandma said something like how you have to have a bit of a pissed off attitude. And I was like, that checks out. That checks out. Like I am pissed off. And while I may come off, you know, bubbly and like I'm smiling and stuff, like I'm angry, and that's why I'm making this video. You know, I don't have to be screaming and shouting and cursing and throwing things in order to be angry. I need to just feel it and then write it out, say it, and put it out into the world, and hopefully this helps make a change. And while I'm filled with gratitude about having vaccine access in this country and the fact that I have been fully vaccinated, I'm also disgusted that vaccine access is a privilege. Over 1/3 of the world's population lives in India and Africa, and to date, less than 4% have been vaccinated. This reflects what we see globally, with only 1% of vaccines going to low-income countries. Countries in the global south are currently unlikely to receive a COVID-19 vaccine until 2023. And on top of that, it is infuriating to watch our fellow Americans refuse to get vaccinated based on lies, propaganda, misinformation, or honestly, how I like to put it, based on their ego. I just see so much ego that plays into it. Meanwhile, people in poor countries are dying because they don't have vaccine access due to rich countries like the United States hoarding vaccines and protecting patents. Patents and other monopolies are often an obstacle between people and the medicines, vaccines, and tests they need. The pharma company that holds the patent can block countries from increasing manufacturing and supply and charge high prices. Essentially, the patents held by pharma companies in rich countries are a major reason why poor countries do not have access to a life-saving vaccine against COVID-19. There is a solution to this problem, and it's the Wto Trips Waiver. Most countries have their own patent laws, but international agreements about how they enforce each other's patents and disputes when countries suspect each other of ignoring IP concerns tend to be mediated by the World Trade Organization, which I'll refer to as the WTO. The trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights, or TRIPS agreement, is an international agreement about the protection of intellectual property rights and trade. The WTO's TRIPS Council is the body tasked with overseeing the implementation of the TRIPS agreement. The WTO Trips Waiver is essentially a patent waiver that would allow the vaccines to be produced and distributed globally for a fraction of the cost. Proponents argue that, if approved, the patent waiver would help facilitate a rapid increase in coronavirus vaccine production, which has thus far failed to meet global needs, particularly in low-income countries, which have received just 1.1% of the 3.7 billion doses administered thus far. The waiver calls for a temporary suspension of vaccine-related intellectual property rules that are barring manufacturers around the world from making generic vaccines, a restriction that has left a handful of powerful pharmaceutical corporations with a monopoly over production. What a great solution, right? However, not all rich countries are on board to support this waiver. What a shock. Earlier this year, President Biden backed the proposed patent waiver for vaccines to waive intellectual property or IP rules relating to the vaccines so that more organizations can make them. However, his administration also said that it may take time to waive these intellectual property rights. This could just be posturing. We won't know until we see action. And so far, the US has not gone further than its announcement of support. Again, shocking. The Biden administration has announced that it will work with the World Trade Organization, WTO, to negotiate a deal to suspend intellectual property rights associated with the COVID-19 vaccines, a surprise move for the administration, which had initially resisted taking such a step. See, it's this last sentence that makes me think it could just be posturing. What changed? Did your heart grow 3 sizes? Regardless of the administration's intentions, we are running out of time. Getting the WTO to agree on a patent waiver is the largest barrier to stopping COVID-19. If we're going to eliminate the threat of a COVID-19 variant that could infect even vaccinated people in a serious way, we have to vaccinate everyone in the world. Or we need to reach herd immunity. The percentage of people who need to be immune in order to achieve herd immunity varies with each disease. For example, herd immunity against measles requires about 95% of the population to be vaccinated. The remaining 5% will be protected by the fact that measles will not spread among those who are vaccinated. For polio, the threshold is about 80%. The proportion of the population that must be vaccinated against COVID-19 to begin inducing herd immunity is not known. This is an important area of research and will likely vary according to the community, the vaccine, the populations prioritized for vaccination, and other factors. So for now, our best bet is to get everyone in the world vaccinated because we don't have that information. So the US is on board to support the TRIPS waiver, at least symbolically. But it's not just the US who needs to agree to waive these patents. It's other rich countries too. The US isn't the only country that needs to be persuaded for the WTO to agree on a patent waiver. For their part, the EU, the UK, Japan, and Switzerland have expressed opposition. But the US is influential in these debates, and the Biden administration's about-face may well be decisive. But we have yet to see the decision of the US take effect on other countries. Countries like Canada, the UK, and Germany are still standing in the way of the WTO TRIPS waiver. Despite having the support of more than 140 nations, the head of the World Health Organization, and hundreds of civil society organizations spanning the globe, the proposed waiver has been mired in fruitless negotiations for months as wealthy WTO members, most prominently Germany, the United Kingdom, and Canada, refuse to drop their opposition in the face of growing grassroots pressure. So if reaching global herd immunity is the only way to end this pandemic, why are rich countries not waiving their patents? Why not agree to the WTO TRIPS waiver? Why not allow global production? Oh, money. Money. I forgot about money. It's because of money, right? I forgot because that's not the only thing that takes up headspace in here. I forgot because money isn't the only important thing in the world. It's actually one of the least important things in the world. Unless you are rich, apparently. All of the frontrunner vaccines, except for Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine, are either solely or jointly developed or produced by European pharmaceutical companies. While the EU appears to be helping to alleviate this dire global crisis, it clearly has incentive to protect the interests of its pharmaceutical companies. Let's speak plainly and put these governments on blast, all right? These governments are protecting the profits of pharmaceutical corporations instead of saving lives. They are allowing pharmaceutical corporations to protect their monopolies, restrict production, and drive up prices. Essentially, they are allowing Big Pharma to put profit over people, allowing a very small number of extremely wealthy individuals to keep hoarding more gold like the fucking dragons that they are, at the expense of human life. Even though they already made so much money with the vaccines that they have already sold. Pfizer reaps hundreds of millions in profits from COVID vaccine. The company said its vaccine generated $3.5 billion in revenue in the first 3 months of this year, even though they created many of these vaccines with public money, even though they can't produce enough for us to vaccinate the world in time. If you are not incredibly furious at how often a minority of extremely wealthy individuals exploit the majority in 2021, you need to sort out your priorities. Is that bad? Do I need to work on my English accent? Tell me in the comments below, please. And before you ask, charity is not going to work. Remember the part about hoarding vaccines? The world's wealthiest nations have locked up much of the near-term supply. This is a manufacturing capacity issue and another reason to waive the patents. While pharmaceutical giants and rich nations have agreed to donate millions of doses to poor countries, such vaccine charity has done little to remedy the massive inequities in access, leaving vulnerable people across the globe unprotected from the now dominant Delta variant and other future coronavirus strains. Pfizer, which has sold most of its vaccine supply to rich countries, is seeking approval for booster shots in the US as many people in poor nations remain without a single dose. That's right. The main focus of Pfizer right now is to ensure that they can also make money off of booster shots. Meanwhile, people in poor countries are just left to die. Don't you just love capitalism? Honestly, the only reason that I have been vaccinated is because I live in a country that is able to afford these vaccines. But that same country is directly contributing to vaccine inequality by hoarding vaccines and protecting the profits of pharmaceutical companies. Sure, the US government has said that they support the waiver, but words without action are meaningless. If the US is to be a leader in global health, it must match its word with action by supporting the proposal and facilitating its implementation while calling on others to do so as well. Given the amount of power and influence the US has, what happens here inevitably affects the rest of the world. Today, most of the world's 7 billion people are living without access to life-saving vaccines and treatments. Leading human rights advocates worldwide have called for a waiver on intellectual property, noting that access to vaccines is a racial justice issue. I don't deserve this vaccine any more than anyone else does, and it shouldn't be a privilege to get vaccinated. It should be a human right for everyone, everywhere, free of charge. So what can we do to help right these wrongs? Because this is wrong. We can look back at history. Patents must be lifted. It's happened before. In 2001, after years of public pressure, the countries of the world agreed to free HIV/AIDS treatments from patents, allowing affordable, generic versions to be made, saving millions of lives. Now they must do it again. The answer lies here. We must put public pressure on the rich countries of the world to agree on the TRIPS waiver. The next informal meeting of the WTO's TRIPS Council, the body tasked with overseeing the implementation of the agreement on trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights, is not until September, nearly a year after India and South Africa first introduced the patent waiver. As a deal on a patent waiver remains out of reach, the highly transmissible Delta variant is wreaking havoc across the globe, tearing through Africa, South America, Southeast Asia, and other regions with low vaccination rates. Africa is now in the deadliest stage of its pandemic, and there is a little prospect of relief in sight, the New York Times reported last week. The Delta variant is sweeping across the continent. Namibia and Tunisia are reporting more deaths per capita than any other country. Hospitals across the continent are filling up, oxygen supplies and medical workers are stretched thin, and recorded deaths jumped 40% last week alone. Even a year from now, the Times continued, supplies may not be enough to meet demand from Africa's 1.3 billion people unless richer countries share their stockpiles and rethink how the distribution system should work. So I ask that you join me in helping to build public pressure to support the TRIPS waiver now. There are petitions that you can sign in favor of the TRIPS waiver that I have linked in the description box below. If you're from one of the rich countries that is blocking the waiver, it is especially important that you take action. Please talk to your friends and family about the waiver too. Send them the action items in this video. We can all do something. So what does this all come down to? This is an inequality and we must address it. Not only because it is unfathomable that a life-saving vaccine is being commodified with such reckless abandon for human life, but also because this is the only way to end the pandemic. We have to accept how interconnected the modern world is. We don't live in a bubble. As long as we don't reach global herd immunity, none of us are safe from variants of this virus, and the pandemic will not end. The people and the organizations advocating to waive the patents keep saying the same thing. None of us are safe until all of us are safe. It's as simple as that. And doesn't that show us just how true it is that every single one of us is a citizen of planet Earth, a global citizen of planet Earth, not just a citizen of one country? We are bound to each other's fates, and it's time that we stop pretending that we aren't. And instead, we should embrace it fully. Let's use this pandemic to set a precedent that, as the People's Vaccine, which is an organization, puts it, when safe and effective vaccines are developed, they are produced rapidly at scale and made available for all people in all countries, free of charge. The People's Vaccine is a coalition demanding that COVID-19 vaccines be freely available to everyone, everywhere, free of charge. Like they say, we need a people's vaccine, not a profit vaccine. Please visit the links in my description box to read more about the People's Vaccine and what actions you can take to support their work. We've talked about the Trips Waiver, which removes important barriers, which is the first step to ensuring that the vast majority of the world's population does not need to wait years to be fully vaccinated. And one of the petitions in the description box is a direct action item that supports a people's vaccine. This petition calls for the patents to be suspended. However, please note that waiving the patent is just one demand that the People's Vaccine is making, because it's going to take a lot more than just simply waiving the patent in order to end the pandemic. Additional changes need to be made in order to expand vaccine availability. The People's Vaccine is calling on governments and pharmaceutical corporations to ensure the vaccine is purchased at true cost prices and provided free of charge to people, prevent monopolies on vaccine and treatment production by making public funding for research and development conditional on research institutions and pharmaceutical companies freely sharing all information, data, biological material, know-how, and intellectual property. Ensure the vaccine is sold at affordable prices. Pricing must be transparent and based on the cost of research, development, and manufacturing, as well as taking into account any public funding provided. Implement fair allocation of the vaccine, which prioritizes health workers and other at-risk groups in all countries. Distribution among countries should be based on their population size. In-country vaccination programs should include marginalized groups, including refugees, prisoners, and people living in slums and other crowded housing conditions. Allocation between and within countries should be based on need and not ability to pay. Ensure full participation of governments in developing countries, as well as civil society from North and South, in decision-making fora about the vaccines and other COVID-19 technologies, and ensure transparency and accountability of all decisions. Their website is linked down below, and something that I do want to bring your attention to is this quote from Jonas Salk, the inventor of the polio vaccine, on who owned his discovery. Quote, "The people. There is no patent. Could you patent the sun?" That's so powerful. It's so powerful. Please also click on the links in the description box to learn more about 1. A global movement campaigning to end extreme poverty and preventable disease by 2030, so that everyone everywhere can lead a life of dignity and opportunity. They too have action items you can do in order to support vaccine equality. I will link those petitions in the description box. It's imperative that we not only recognize what a privilege it is to get vaccinated and actually get vaccinated, but we must also wield that privilege. The privilege of being alive and being able to add our voice to the demand for change, to demand vaccine access for every human being on the planet. Ending the COVID-19 pandemic starts with the Trips Waiver and expanding vaccine availability to vaccinate the world. But I want to point out that the waiver is temporary. We should not return to the status quo once the pandemic is over. We should take this opportunity to build a better future. We need an overhaul of the current system. We need structural change in high-income countries. Because if we stick with the current system, when the next pandemic hits, poor countries will have to depend on the companies and countries of the West for charity and wait until North American and European countries are satisfied that their own citizens are safe first. Also, that pharma companies can continue to profit off of life-saving vaccines. I'm upset, if you cannot tell. That's why I'm making sure I'm reading it and saying what I need to say. Do we want to continue to actively deny 70% of humanity their right to health? I'd like to take this moment to read a couple of incredibly heartbreaking tweets. Please remember that when we say the Delta variant is wreaking havoc in unvaccinated countries, it's real people who are dying. They deserve vaccines as much as you or I do. So one of these tweets it's back from May, but I saw it recently. I have to find her account really well. I'll put her account here. She's a doctor, and this is from her Twitter profile. My fingers tremble as I type this. As of today, COVID has become a personal tragedy. I have lost both of my parents in a matter of 15 days in India. My precious, beautiful mommy and papa, who made me who I am, have left me forever. Life will never be the same. For those who think COVID-19 is a hoax or just the flu, it killed both my parents within 15 days of each other before they could get vaccinated. Yes, read that again. I feel angry both as a daughter and a doctor. Sorry. I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry for having emotions. It's, it's all a buildup of like being in this pandemic for so long and knowing that like people around the world are dying and that like people in our country just like don't care and are just kind of living life as normal. And I wasn't going to share this either, but I have family that hasn't gotten vaccinated, and that's kind of who I've been talking to, that I was referring to as it being a brick wall. And it's this could be anybody's family that this happens to. And, it's all just so infuriating. Like, you have vaccine access and you won't get vaccines. And then people in other countries don't have vaccine access. And then, they are people that are loved by their children, by people around them, and they matter, and they don't have vaccine access because of what our governments are doing. Okay. Let me get back to where I was. So my camera battery died in time for me to like get it together, which is, I didn't mind getting vulnerable because I think that maybe that's something that we're missing in the world, is people willing to be vulnerable and willing to, speak out about things that hurt and things that are affecting them. And hopefully someone who's watching this doesn't feel so alone in their struggles right now. Even though I see a lot of people out in the world acting as if everything's normal, I also know that there are a lot of people out there like me who may be vaccinated and are still, wearing their masks out in public because, of the Delta variant, and who are still mostly staying at home and, are only seeing other vaccinated people, and also advocating for a change in the world. And, it doesn't have to be in this way where you're doing the most like I am, which is not even doing the most, because I recognize that I'm just sitting here talking about it, not actually, on the ground doing things, but, as a form of speech doing the most. But, at least talking to someone about issues that you care about and signing petitions and, just continuing to not let 2020 and what we learned in 2020 be forgotten and be in vain, I guess. So let's keep going. I made myself a tea. And honestly, I've been doing this for hours now. So I'm just going to read the rest of it because I'm getting a headache and I want to just cuddle with my dogs on the couch. Honestly, I think I need a good cuddle. Please join me in truly ending the pandemic with the aforementioned actions and continuing to keep your eyes open to the injustices in the world so we can push for progress such as universal health care and an overhaul to our global health system. We can do this by committing to continuing to talk about these issues, committing to hold our governments accountable, and supporting the work of organizations like the People's Vaccine, One, Third World Network, and Movement Law Lab that I have linked down below. Finally, I would like to end with some powerful excerpts from an Alliance Magazine blog post Q&A with Pretty Christelle, a co-founder and co-executive director of the Initiative for Medicines, Access, and Knowledge at IMAC Global, in which she speaks to Alliance about equity in vaccines distribution and how philanthropy can intervene for better outcomes. I have quoted her throughout this video as well, and I'm going to try to show, what is taken out of articles and all that kind of stuff. So by the time you're watching it, you've probably already seen that. So I will also link the blog in the description box. It's titled, "We Need Nothing Short of an Overhaul to Our Global Health System." I highly encourage you to read that blog, as well as she outlines various ways to support changes to our global health system. This is not just an issue afflicting poorer countries, but one that harms wealthier ones, like the EU nations and US as well. 13% of Americans have lost a loved one in the last 5 years because they were unable to afford the cost of treatment. That figure is twice as high for people of color. Soaring medical costs are leaving seniors rationing their prescriptions to make them last longer, and spouses begging their friends and family for donations to cover the cost of their cancer treatments. A primary driver of this crisis is the outdated patent system that influences medicine's access worldwide. From an economic justice perspective, in high-income countries, we prioritize the bottom lines of private actors over public health. But we are at a unique moment where we can rewrite the rules in favor of balance, which would save lives not just in the US, but around the world, where research and development is based on public health priorities and not the shifting winds of the market. A system that prioritizes ongoing vaccine research, not just as a frenetic response to catastrophe. One where democracies don't unfairly hand out monopoly rights to a powerful few, but instead work for those most in need. With the intersection of the pandemic and racial awakening, philanthropy currently has a tremendous opportunity to move away from the market-driven status quo that is literally killing people of color all over the world. This is one of those once-in-a-lifetime moments when we can change the course of history. We're weathering an unprecedented global pandemic. We're acknowledging our interdependence and the inequality that exists among us and the systems that created it like never before. It's time to take action, to fund and organize and agitate and collaborate and make sure that our children and grandchildren look back and realize that we came together and did what was right before it was too late. See, I knew there was a reason I wanted to read these out loud, because I'm reading them and I'm just like, I feel like I'm filled with this person's energy of there are people in the world that are trying to make the world a better place, and the least that we can do is talk about it and acknowledge their work and donate to their work when we can and sign the petitions that they're putting together and, all the little actions that lead to change. And also, I just want to say that if you live in the US and you don't want universal health care, even just in the US, I just don't understand. I'm pretty sure most people know at least someone who has had some kind of health scare, health problem, health issue, where they've had to ask other people for money. I personally know people who have had to go through cancer treatments and have had to rely on charity to pay for those bills, and probably have also gone into medical debt because of that. I personally had medical debt, but anyway, it's kind of crazy to come to the realization that we've all been so, in American culture, it's been so normalized to us to not have healthcare, that you have to have a job that gives you healthcare. And then even then, when you have healthcare through that job, or health insurance through that job, they won't pay for certain things because they just like don't feel like it, and they just make all these policies, and it's just messed up, man. It's just messed up. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you for taking action. And if you've been vaccinated, thank you for getting vaccinated. If you've been staying home, thank you for staying home. It's not too late to change your mind on these things. It's not too late to start staying home. It's not too late to go get vaccinated. It's not too late to start giving a fuck. It's not too late to start caring. So I welcome you to start caring, you know? We all have moments where we realize that we can be better human beings. And honestly, like, all of us need to be reevaluating and seeing what's important to us and what we want to contribute to the world. Also, if you have any questions about my sources, I am linking all of them in the description box for transparency. I also just want to make sure that you know that I did my research, and you can also drop your question in the comment, and I'll link, the source directly in a comment. In this age of misinformation, I want to be very transparent of where I'm getting my information, so that you know that you can trust me. And honestly, like, there's no harm in it and being like, here's where I got my information. I don't even want to get into media literacy. It's too much. But anyway, I'll see you guys in the next video. I think the next one's going to be a Harry Potter one. So if you're interested in that, please subscribe, which feels like, I don't think I want to put that in here. Should I? Is it weird? I don't know. Let me know if it's weird, I guess. But in my next video, I'm going to be doing a Harry Potter video. I think that I'm going to show off more of my collection. So if you're interested in that, please subscribe and stay tuned. I will be at home with my girlfriend and my pups until further notice, until things are, under control, whatever that means. I'm just kind of going with the flow, taking in life as the waves come in, and just trying to, go along for the ride and do my best. Oh, and so that you can see that I put my money where my mouth is, let me put my tea down. This Pro-Vaxxer crew neck is sold out, so I'm not trying to sell it. There's no partnership, nothing like that. I just want to say that all net proceeds from this crew neck by Phenomenal are supporting grassroots mobilization and education efforts to disseminate trusted information and ensure accessibility and equitability in vaccine distribution, particularly in communities of color. That's all. See you next time.